everyone, this is Demel Gonzalez of Heartwood Financial Services. Hey, thanks again for joining us for our latest video on financial education. Yes, I am actually tackling, as you can see here, crypto assets or cryptocurrencies. And this is something that I've wanted to talk about for a long time, but frankly have not felt like I knew enough to really get in front of a video camera and talk about this with any kind of authority. And frankly, I feel still that I don't. I've spent a lot of time reading, watching, going to conferences about the topic, and so I think I know a little bit now that I can share with you. It's probably about 100 hours worth of time that I spent on this. And some of you might wonder what I do on the weekends. Well, now you know. I'm watching and, and learning about cryptocurrencies, and also crying over the Miami Dolphins. But anyways, so I've been wanting to bring this up, and hopefully this will be helpful for everybody. I know there's a lot of misinformation out there about this. I will clarify that I am not endorsing cryptocurrencies, and I'm not saying that it's bad. I just want to explore this with you, and I want you to learn about it in a healthy way based on the facts that are out there. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Today's video is going to be about why are we talking about this, how did this come about, what are some of the concerns out there. The next video that's going to come out the next month, and then the month after that, is going to be essentially what is the crypto assets and the different kinds that are out there, and what are they used for, okay, and maybe what's the future in all this. And then the third one is, how can we invest in this? Maybe the first question should be, should we invest in this? And then how should we invest in this? And what are the more safer ways to do this? Because it still is kind of the wild, wild west out there with these assets. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Thanks for tuning in, and enjoy. So let me kick off the video by showing you this chart. A lot of you have probably seen this. This is basically the tech bubble and how it burst, and there was a trail of tears following it. But what's interesting about the tech bubble is that there were some legitimately great companies that were part of that are still around today, and frankly are dominant players. But there were also some that kind of came and went and withered away. And I feel like there's a little bit of a parallel here with the crypto craze right now. I do call it a craze because there is a lot of speculation in it, a lot of people that are investing in it, and they don't really know what it is or how it works. They don't really care. They just care that it's going up. And, back in the early 90s, and going through the 90s, I remember the same thing happening with the internet and how it's going to change the world, and it's going to, stocks, can only go up because of this. And so it ends usually in some sort of euphoria, and then it comes back to reality. And there could be some parallelism with cryptocurrencies. But the point that I also want to make here is that I do believe that there's probably going to be some winners. I don't believe that it's all going to come crashing down and it's all going to disappear. It's probably going to be like the internet bubble, but there's going to be some winners. And so there's a lot of cryptocurrencies out there. The likelihood of all of them changing the world, not going to happen. I think I can make that bold of a statement without knowing everything about every single one. So something to keep in mind. It's definitely a craze out there, but there are going to be some winners at the end of the day. All right, to really understand what cryptocurrencies are all about, you really have to take a huge step back and really understand the concept of money. Okay, so basically this illustration here is I got this caveman or prehistoric person, right, that shoots this buffalo with his bow and arrow, and they don't have refrigeration, so he's got to do something with this buffalo. So he goes around, he starts peddling around extra meat. And there's other people out there that are hungry and love a little protein, so they're like, hey, I would love some of this meat. Maybe like in this picture, they had some apples that they would barter for, and that worked out pretty good. But in some cases, they probably didn't have apples or something that this caveman or prehistoric person would want, right? So they would probably go ahead and still give them the meat because it was just gonna, it's gonna go bad. So they might as well give it away, help this other person out. But they made a mental note, this person owes me something. And that other person did the same thing. Ooh, shoot, I owe this person a big hunk of meat. And so imagine as civilizations got more populated, things got a little bit more complicated. Imagine keeping all these mental notes. Keeping all these mental notes was kind of like keeping a mental ledger. And so at some point they figured, all right, well, we need to figure out an easier way to do this. And you can see how in just about every society, like I have in this little chart down here, they all created some sort of form of money. And so it could have been little coins, seashells, rocks, whatever it was. It had to be something that they can somewhat transport easily, something that was hard to replicate. So, you couldn't just pick up more seashells and say, hey, look, I am rich. So it had to have certain properties. And that's basically how the coins started coming about over time. Now, at that time, the coins actually represented the wealth, and so you were able to trade for that over time. But what happened is if you had too much of this, it was really hard to get around, and frankly, some people can come and steal it from you, right? So banks were created, and so people started putting money in banks. And then the banks would just give you little pieces of paper, basically IOUs for the money that they had in the banks. And that's how paper currency kind of came about. And so you can see here, this is back in 18 AD. And now today, we've kind of turned it into more of a digital thing, but it still is the same concept. It's an IOU for something that you have in the bank. Now, back in the 70s, we completely got disconnected from what we used to use as the standard, which was the gold standard. And so now we don't have to have gold at the Federal Reserve for those little pieces of paper. Now those pieces of paper are good because the U.S. government says they're good. It's the good faith and credit of the U.S. government and all the governments around the world. And so that's what's called fiat currency. And so that was one of the issues that this gentleman, supposedly from Japan, his name is Satoshi Nakamoto, hopefully I pronounced that right, he basically didn't like this concept of federal governments controlling all the money. They could just print more money. They can reduce the money, but usually they would print more money because they would spend too much and they had to figure out how to pay back debts by printing more money. And so this is a common phenomenon that happens in lots of civilizations. With inflation, and we've seen that since 2008. We've basically got almost 10 times more money supply out there than we did before 2008 and all the financial crisis that we saw back then. And so he started getting concerned about this. So what he essentially wanted to create was an alternative to the monetary systems that we have today. And so that's how this whole idea of Bitcoin was created. And the underlying part of Bitcoin is what's called the blockchain technology. And so I'll explain that next, and that's really how it's going to help you understand what Bitcoin is. So Mr. Nakamoto basically thought, all right, well, instead of keeping track of what you owe me and what I owe you through banks or by keeping a bunch of coins or scratching stuff on a stick, he basically created a modern age version of money by creating what's called a digital ledger. It's basically like a giant Excel spreadsheet. Think about a giant Excel spreadsheet that everybody has access to, but everybody that is on there is checking it out to make sure it's real, it's true, and there's consensus over it. So you can't just change it without everybody noticing. And that's essentially what's called the blockchain. There's all these different computers that are out there that every time there's a transaction that takes place and changes one of those cells in that Excel spreadsheet, all those computers around the world are checking to make sure that that is true and that is correct, and verifying that information. Now, it's called crypto because they have to solve all these different algorithms and math problems to have the right to do that authentication. It's actually a lot of work, and frankly, it uses a lot of computer power, and that's actually one of the things that people complain about, is that there's a lot of energy usage in this process. We'll get more on that into the next one. But essentially, that's what's being done. We're creating this blockchain by all this verification. And so you have to pay these people that do all this work in something. And so Satoshi created the Bitcoin, and that's how he paid the people that did all this verification, these miners. Okay, and so what happened is Bitcoin has kind of turned into a phenomenon on its own, because people started thinking, well, you know, this Bitcoin, it could be used as an alternative form of doing money, and it's finite. There's only 21 million of these tokens called Bitcoin, and so governments can't just create more. It's decentralized, so you don't have a government that's controlling the supply of it. And so this idea is kind of gaining popularity because you heard about all the money that's being printed and the potential inflation that might come with it. So you can see how this has been gaining popularity and has essentially been becoming what's known as a digital gold, or an alternative to gold in a digital format. All right, pretty cool stuff. All right, next I'm going to talk about some of the concerns and really what this market looks like. So this chart here demonstrates one of the biggest reasons I wanted to bring this topic up. It's because the crypto asset marketplace now represents almost $3 trillion in assets. That is a huge amount of money that is invested in cryptocurrencies. It's now being adopted more and more by institutions, hedge fund managers, mutual fund managers. In fact, there's even now different ways that you can buy and sell it on the exchanges. There's different securities and even ETFs that are starting to come out based on the derivatives of different cryptocurrencies. And so after all the research that I've done, all the reading and listening and watching, it seems like this is something that is not going away. Now, I'm still not 100% convinced that this is going to change the world. There's obviously lots of concerns out there. The number one concern that I've heard that I think is maybe the most legit is that cryptocurrencies could be used nefariously, right, by criminals and terrorists. And that is definitely true. You know, the system that is set up, how I explain the blockchain, it can be very anonymous, and so it can be very easy for criminals to do bad things and do money laundering and things like that. But one could make the argument that in today's world, all those things happen. It doesn't require cryptocurrencies to do that. You could do all those different types of things with the systems that we have today. You know, think about all the money laundering that happens with cash. And so that, I feel, is an argument that could be made really even on the current system that we have now. And of course, there's a lot of big names out there that have been kind of buying into cryptocurrencies and their future, but then there's also been a lot of people that have been very negative about it. Jamie Dimon here, he is the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. He's been a really big opponent of it, and you could also say a lot of big governments around the world have been big opponents. In fact, recently China has completely banned all of the mining operations, which is all those verifications that are going on, and even the exchanges and the use of the crypto assets in China. And so it does make you kind of wonder and take a little bit of a step back, because, you know, what other countries and governments are going to ban these things, and how is it going to affect it? But the more I read and listen about this, I get the feeling that it might not be enough to stop this. This could be something that could be almost unstoppable at this point. Now, I might be wrong, and I'm certainly not 100% convinced of that yet, so that's something I'm still contemplating. But you do have to think about it. The opponents to cryptocurrencies, they have a lot of conflicts of interest. I mean, Jamie Dimon, he is a big CEO of a monster bank, and crypto assets are essentially decentralizing money, which means that the people in control of the money today, the banks, they're going to lose some control, right? Unless they can somehow figure out a way to get their hands into this. And so they haven't quite figured that out, but I'm sure they probably will. So obviously there are going to be opponents that are going to have some conflicts of interest. And could you probably think of a few reasons why China may not like not having control over their money? Now, the United States have been contemplating this too, but they see more of the potentials in that blockchain technology, which we were talking about a little bit ago, and what that could do in our society and our financial system. So they've been a little bit more hesitant to really shut it down completely, and I think it will probably continue. So this is something that I think we need to continue to monitor, learn more about. It's going to be worth our time, I think, to do so. All right. Thanks again for watching, guys. I hope this was a good starter video to get the juices flowing. Stay tuned for the next ones that are going to be coming out in the next couple months that are just going to dig a little bit more into what this is and how does it work and what purposes does it have and how you invest in it. Thanks a lot, guys.